we're debating is 80% a good rate for scoring. I think for the free throws, it's
It's
actually
a very good percentage. So Chanel is a very good free throw shooter, right?
yes. And we know at the beginning of the season his rate was below 80. Then at some moment we know he got better. It was above 80. Is it true that at some point it was 80? So we are talking about his performance, and we can imagine it on the timeline. So there was a moment, let's say here, this is our N0 and N1, right? So when we look, if you guys try to prove that this is true or false, in which region would you have a chance to prove it? Before N0, after N1, or in between?
Probably in between, because that's probably like where it crosses the 80% mark.
Yes. So before, his performance can be very bad, right? Until he reaches N0. And you cannot control what happened later. So it means somewhere here in between, we have somehow a discrete continuity. We don't know if here somewhere was a moment where he reached 80%.
Right. I want to say a little bit more. See, technically, even before here, he could be pretty good too. He could go from 100% and make his first free throw and jump to 50 and miss his second one or so on, right? So we don't even know, right? He could start with quite high and then go down and then, and bounce back, right? So what we only know is what? There is a moment, it's 80 and there's a moment below 80 and there's a moment becomes more than 80, right? And of course, based on the distribution, you should look for the things in between, because before and after you have no idea what will happen, right?
Right. So to make the jump in performance means there was a moment when his performance was what, K over N?
Yeah.
It's below 80%. And if this is not true, then with the next throw, he was above 80%.
But I think this is part we have to be very, very careful. It's the next throw. Because this does not represent N0 and N1. That's very, very critical.
So this is right as
Right.
he crosses the line.
Right. Because the reason is this, like you said earlier, this is discrete. So he make free throws, he could go from 80, below 80% to some percent and then go down again or whatever. But what we know is this is a line he has to cross. And because he has to cross, and you also assume there's no touching in the middle, there will be a moment that what? They just go one more shot and they really cross. And that's important, right?
Yes. And then we have this. So let's represent 80% as a fraction. This is 4 over 5. So what do we get? We get that 5k is less than 4n.
From left-hand side, yeah.
And from here we get that 4n plus 1 is less than 5k plus 1. Right?
So right now, are we trying to find some values of k and n that will give us this example?
Yes, yes. So if you look here, this is equivalent from these two. You get that 4n. From here you get less than 5k, and this is less than 5k plus 1. Oh, well, is it possible?
Well, they're all integers, so there's no integer between two any consecutive integers. It's impossible.
That's why this gives us a contradiction.
This is not going to work. You put a cross sign on it, yeah.
So it means that there has to be a point where it crosses exactly 80%.
Yeah.
Yes. And now you can think what percentages.
Yeah, why 80% is important,
It
right?
really doesn't work for like.
For example, if I
60,
change
right?
this to 60,
I mean, clearly doesn't work. Like we saw right here, this example, right? From 1/2 to 2/3.
Yeah, you have 100% at the beginning, then 50%, and then 66%.
Yeah.
and then if you keep making more or miss a few, you are not going to exactly cross what? 60%,
60%.
right?
So what was important in our proof to get this contradiction. Which percentages would work?
Like the fractions n over n plus, like over 4 n over n plus 1.
Yes, when you have it in the lowest terms, the difference between them is exactly
Right. The key is for you to produce this one, right? Right. So the next number is what? Actually, what works?
So the next one will be
5 over
5, 6.
6.
5, 6. Right. It's a very high, even higher percentage.
If you go lower, it can be 3/4 or 75%, then 2/3, and then 1/2 also works.
Yeah. So that means that anything of the form a over a plus 1 will work. Does that mean that anything that's not in that form will not work?
It's probably
You
true.
might be able to find a construction or something to prove that.
Well, if it's not a rational number, then it clearly cannot be reached. If it's a
Well,
rational,
yeah.
then we can probably like use something that finds out and okay, that sticks in between.
Yes, I think you can always do
When
it.
it's not in lowest terms, I think it, or when the fraction is in lowest terms and the difference is not 1, you should be able to do that.
Mhm.
You can leave that as something to think about.